Welcome to the Guyver Geek YouTube channel. I'm your host, Donavon Thompson, aka the Guyver Geek. And guys, today we have another exciting episode of Guyver Legends. We have the one, the only, Mr. David Hayter.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for your support of Guyver and all of your audience's support of Guyver. It was a big part of my career.
Yeah, no, it's super surreal talking to you first of all because I've been watching this film. I'm 30, I'm 31. I had to think about it for a second. And so I've been watching Guyver 2 since it come out, which it's debatable of when you should be watching it, how young you should be watching it, but I was allowed to anyway. So you and all the filmmakers, Steve and Kathy and Bruno, all you guys have been with me my entire life, and it means the world to me and also the Guyver community to kind of sit down and talk about you as an actor and a writer and a director, but also really kind of dive into the Guyver stuff because it's just something that I kind of say sometimes being a Guyver fan is it's hard sometimes because we don't get a lot of information about it, and again, it means the world that you're sitting down with us.
Again, thank you for having me. Hopefully, I can illuminate some of the mysteries.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely. Real quick, so I kind of I watched the live show, the 30th anniversary of the Guyver 2 screening. What was that like seeing all the cast members and the crew and Steve Wang?
It was awesome. The Frida Cinema through this event, and it was the 30th anniversary screening. We had like 20 people from the cast and crew, including Steve Wang and Kathy Christopherson and Bruno, and just so many people that had been there, like building the cave set, and just like it was just such a family-run thing, and everybody except for me were had to do like set building, and like everybody had to pitch in a number of different ways. So it was very much like a family, and so we all hooked up at this weird collection of restaurants near the theater beforehand, and we had some beers and we hung out and got to see everybody. It was awesome. And then we watched the movie, and the movie played great, and people laughed and cheered, and it was very special, very cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, I started the Guyver Geek YouTube channel kind of up-resing and kind of do like a small degrain color correction of Guyver 2. And then end up Free to Cinema and Nostalgic Entertainment reached out to me and said, "Hey, can we get that version you did?" And I was like, "Absolutely." And I had already interviewed Bruno. I was fixing to interview Kathy, and it was like this perfect storm of all these kind of things happening. And it's awesome talking to you guys, and it's just super exciting. But let's kind of backtrack a little bit, David. Let's kind of talk about you getting into acting, right? So you've been an actor, a voice actor from front of the camera, behind the booth. You've also done some writing for a couple small independent films, and then yeah, exactly. That's issue 133 of X-Men.
Correct. Well done.
Yeah, there you go. I think
Yeah.
Wolverine's fighting the hell something. I can't
Hellfire
think.
Club.
Hellfire
Yeah,
Club.
he's in
Yeah,
the basement of the Hellfire Club. He's
there
on
you
his
go.
own.
I
What
almost
is
had
it?
it all.
Wolverine lashes out.
Yeah, that's a great cover. It's a classic cover. And of course, you've also directed. So can we talk about what was your first interest? Was it always starting as acting? I know that I think you did theater really young, right? The age of 9. Is that correct?
That was my first thing. I did a play in Costa Mesa, California, when I was 9 years old, and yeah, I started acting then, and I loved it, and then I started writing. I mean, basically like Indiana Jones, Star Wars fan fiction when I was 12, which wasn't really a thing, but I just started doing it. And so I fell in love with writing then, and then I started putting on my own shows in high school. So I was actually producing these shows and sort of pulling them together and hiring the actors and overseeing the sets and all that stuff. And so that was kind of cool. And those three things became kind of the cornerstones of my career. I went to California when I was 20 and wanted to be an actor. And I would have loved to have been a screenwriter or producer or director, but I didn't know how you get jobs like that. And, it seemed like scripts were just handed down by the gods. And I didn't
Right.
know, that world at all. But I understood acting. I understood, you go in and you do an audition. If they like you, they hire you. So it just kind of evolved. I planned to be an actor, and then in '97, I made a movie called Burn. A friend of mine wanted to star in this movie, and I wanted to star in it. So nobody else was going to produce it but us, and so I did a lot of the work producing that film. And it was just like sort of putting on the shows I had put on in Canada in high school, but on a bigger scale. And I found that I really loved putting together the script and putting together the financing, the whole thing. Um, and I started to realize that there were jobs outside of acting that I might be good at as well. And so that was sort of the evolution of it all.
That's awesome. That's pretty incredible that pretty early on it feels like that you saw that there's other opportunities. Because one thing I feel like well, I'm from University of Central Arkansas. That's where I got my master's in film, and we used to do kind of like these tours for new coming students coming in, and it was kind of more for the parents than it was for the students. And at the very end of it, the dean would always kind of sit down and say, "Yes, there is a job in the arts," kind of thing, right? And he was like, "Remember that big long list of credits after the film? Like all those are people with jobs. It's not just the Robert Downeys. It's not just the
Yeah,
guy."
and good
Yeah,
jobs that pay well and are interesting and artistic and take smart people. Yeah, no, I say the same thing. My daughter is 19 now. She's Guyver baby. Um, because my wife and I met on that movie, and so I think there's three Guyver babies, but she's one of them, and she wants to go into the industry, possibly as an executive, possibly as a screenwriter, but we don't know. And my friends are like, what, you really want your kid to go into the entertainment industry? And I'm like, as long as you don't just say, I have to be a movie star and that's it,
right.
there's so many amazing careers in this industry, and you get to do so much cool stuff. And sometimes you get to travel and go on location and whatever. And all of these jobs pay better than average jobs. So it's not easy, but you can make a very, very good life for yourself in the entertainment industry as long as you don't limit yourself to I have to be Tom Cruise or nothing, which was kind of my attitude when I was 20. But
Yeah, yeah, it's one of the things I learned when I was doing my internship is that everyone there felt like there was no clear path to getting there. Like all the
mhm.
executives, their assistants, and then all the other interns, like everyone was from a completely different part of the world. And they all had like one guy was a lawyer and then ended up being a lawyer for the entertainment industry. And they're all in the same building doing contracts for Linda Hamilton and Arnold Schwarzenegger for Terminator. Just it kind of all pulled into this one place. And it was just kind of fascinating seeing like okay, there's so many different paths to kind of break into this industry.
Totally. Well, I always say like the, the last bastion of the American dream is getting a job on some movie executive's desk because, if you do well and you rise up through the company in 3 years, you're going to be a vice president, and it's not an easy career and it's fraught with turnover or whatever, but you can make a massive amount of money just starting out answering the phone. So, um, yeah, it's an interesting business.
Now you've done acting in front of the camera and you've done voice acting, in the booth, so to speak. Can you kind of
Huh?
talk to me about the difference in approaching those? Because I just imagine it takes a different type of skill or muscle to kind of to get, and again, if our listeners aren't familiar, of course, you're very well known for the voice of Solid Snake and Naked Snake in the Metal Gear Solid series.
That's right.
That's yeah, chills. All my friends were huge Metal Gear fans and also you voiced Captain America in the Spider-Man animated series. And of course, you're Sean Barker in Guyver 2 Dark Hero. So is there a different approach getting inside the booth versus, someone putting a slate in front of your face and tons of cast members looking at you?
Yeah, well, obviously they're very different experiences. The primary difference is that working on a movie set as opposed to voiceover is so boring, and you just have so much downtime waiting for them to rearrange cameras and lights and shots, and then you have to do the same scene again and again and again from different perspectives, and it can be monotonous. And so the key there is to be able to rest when you can, get your energy up when you need to, and just sort of get through that marathon slog of ultra action to just absolutely nothing happening for hours. And voiceover is not like that. Voiceover is more like doing a radio play. You come in and um, uh, it's a lot more about um, well, I would say acting is acting, but at the same time, when you're just using your voice, there's a little more that goes into it because you need to indicate movement or action, or you need to make clear through your voice things that they can't see on the in the game or on the video. So yeah, so there's little different techniques, but I would say the primary difference is just being able to keep your energy up on a feature film, a live on camera film, as opposed to voiceover, which is just the best job in the world. It's the people are super nice. Usually everybody's a pro, and you go in and you play and you do your voices, and then you eat a muffin and you leave. It's great. What's not to like?
Do you typically, when you've been in the booth, have you been able to play with other actors in terms of you get to play off them versus, it doesn't always work this way on a movie set, but typically you have them in front of you, there's shot, reverse shot, and you get to kind of act off each
Right.
other if everything works out that way. What about the audio booth? I mean, is it just you kind of acting off yourself or?
It depends on the gig. So I do like I'm the lead Jedi voice in Jedi player voice in Star Wars: The Old Republic. So that one I do on my own, and it's separate lines because you have to do like a light side line, a dark side line, a neutral line. And so there's no conversation to it. And so you have to kind of make it sound like it's natural conversation, like you're actually talking to somebody. But when we did the first Metal Gear, we had uh, like five microphones lined up, and so the cast would stand next to each other, and we'd do it just like a radio play. We'd act out the scenes, and it was so much better than what you normally do in voiceover, where you're by yourself, that I insisted on in my subsequent games. I insisted that it go into my contract that we all record together. So when I would do a
Wow.
Metal Gear game, I'd go into the booth for 3 months, 9 months. Like Metal Gear 4 took 9 months, and then the best voice actors in the world would come in, and we just do scenes together, and it was amazing,
Yeah.
amazing.
My sidebar here. My buddy, he was a huge Metal Gear fan before I ever, well, he introduced it to me. And it was right when I think the PS3 came out, Metal Gear Solid 4 was coming out a year or two after or so and so the launch. And me and him, I watched him play. I didn't know anything about Metal Gear. I watched him play the whole thing from start to finish. And like every 10 seconds, he was pausing a cutscene, pausing. I was like, explain this to me. And by the time it all rolled out, I was like, this is the greatest video game story of all time. And I was just blown away. And then, of course, that made me a fan. And I went back and I started, at three and two, then one, and so on. So yeah, Metal Gear is obviously a huge part of the culture, and it's super exciting. It's super cool to hear that you fought for getting those voices inside the room because I think it makes a difference personally. I think it makes a huge difference.
Totally. I mean, they're all good actors, and the scenes would have worked otherwise, but just to play off each other and to just really get into it is so much more realistic and gives it so much more life. So, yeah, it was just, I mean, that was my desire as an actor, as a producer, really, to try to make the game as good as possible, even though it was my business to do so. But
Well, that's what makes all was it all rising tide. I don't know. There's some phrase there about making everyone
a
is there to
rising
make.
tide lifts all boats.
Yes, thank you. So it's all about, helping each other and also surrounding yourself with people who are better than you at the job, right? It's about like, hey, I'm not the best at this, so you can bring that to the table, but then we can bounce each other's ideas off each other. And that's kind of, sometimes you have that singular vision and that propels you. Other times, everyone brings a piece of the pie and it makes something
Oh
truly
yeah,
special.
you always have to rely on the massive talents of other people, and but the nice thing is the best people in the world are here and doing it, and so you
Yeah.
get you get just amazing quality added to your work.
So one thing, and this is kind of this question's going to hit you kind of two different fronts as an actor and also a director. So one of the things I kind of struggle with, at least when I direct actors is like, okay, should I give them specificity? Should I tell them like, no, I need you to condemn this character, or I need, not be mad, but like, do you want specificity as an actor? Do you want the freedom to play, to kind of discover it more, like to kind of bring in the page to life? And then the flip side is, as a director, when you have a vision, are you kind of like, oh no, I need you to say it like this? And of course, you don't want to just micromanage everything. But I look at like Christopher Nolan's versus someone like a Spielberg. Spielberg is kind of like finding the shots there in the moment, right? He's letting the actors feel it, and then he's blocking it based on that. Where Nolan is like, stick closer to the written word, so to speak.
Um, well, as an actor, I like as much specificity as possible. I mean, the key thing you want to figure out is tone, like how funny does it need to be? How scary does it need to be? I just heard a story of Gary Oldman talking to Chris Nolan. He said, Chris doesn't give direction, but one day I was doing something and he pulled me aside and he said, the stakes are higher than that. And he was like, oh, well, what a great direction that is, and he totally got it. And so, um, so as a director, I there are certain things I want specifically delivered the way I want them delivered, like especially with comedy, with a joke or anything like that. I've got a way I want it to sound in my head, and so I mean, I don't try to micromanage people because usually you hire great actors and they just come in and they nail it. But if it's not clear, I'll go in and really what I'll do is I'll try to do like a Chris Nolan type direction where just like it needs more stakes, it needs more energy or whatever, or I'll put it on my face, how I
That's good.
want it,
Yeah.
and so which is a nice skill to have. So I'm like, no, here it's like so you hear the thing and then you turn and look, and I just act it out, and they can do it. And frankly, if it's a very specific comedic line reading, I'll just do it the way I like it. I mean, that's what Rob Reiner will do because he's such a brilliant comedian. And some actors say they hate that, they don't want that, so I keep it to a minimum. But some actors, like when we were on Wolves, there was a this big powerful line, and Lucas Till asked me, he's like, how do you want it? I told him, he's like, just do it. And so I was like, you're barely Wolves at all, like that sort of thing. And so he just did it, and he was like, oh great, I get it, I see what that is. So there's many different ways to communicate to your actors what you want, and it just depends on how much the actor is understanding what you're getting and how open they are to direction. If you got a big star and they just don't want to be told any direction, you've got to figure out a way to communicate what you want without pissing them off. But for the most part, I find, I all of my sets are pretty, fun, pleasant places to be, and there's not a lot of ego, and so normally we're just playing, and and it really the way I get direction across is my own enthusiasm. It's we're gonna go here and we're gonna go do this, and then boom, push in on you, and they can feel through what I'm doing what they should be doing, I think.
No, yeah. So one thing you said there about kind of putting it on your face and explaining it to them. I directed my thesis for UCA was a Silence of the Lambs meets kind of the Stand By Me or the Goonies kind of situation. So I had kid actors involved, and I felt like putting it on my face. That was it took me a little bit to kind of break. Like, how do I get these kids to kind of get where I need them to go? And then I
Mhm.
felt like I was kind of being more like acting it myself a little bit when I was explaining it to them, and then it
Yeah,
kind of
totally.
it clicked for them. And I was like, oh, that was a small difference for me learning was kids versus adults. I feel like they don't all need it, but like that was what helped me on that production was doing that itself. Um,
Well, plus what I find is I don't really understand people that get mad at hearing a line reading because, like, if I do a line reading for some act, for Emma Stone or whatever, not that you would need to, but when she does it, she's going to make it her own. She's going to do her own thing, but she'll get from me what the intent is, what the tone is, what the execution is, and then, but the actor will still always bring their own thing to it. So you put it on your face, and one of your kid actors does it. It's not quite what you did. It's a combination of what you want, but with their soul feeding through it, you know?
Absolutely. And there's obviously Die Hard's a pretty big famous movie. I watched the commentary on one of the old DVDs back in whenever it was, and one of the things he talked about was he didn't care exactly what the dialogue, if they said the dialogue correctly, he cared more about the tone of like
Yeah.
that coming across. And I thought that was super interesting. That's something I've kind of always carried with me. Like I've never been married too much to my dialogue, as long as obviously there's exceptions, but I thought that was super important. And also on the flip side, you said setting the tone on set. And, it's just it's a huge thing in terms of people being excited about being there because sometimes they're 14, 16-hour days and it can be grueling work, which we'll talk about with Guyver 2 here in a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I've been on all kinds of sets and, when we did the X-Men movies, everybody was terrified all the time and it was just very tense or whatever. But at the same time, that adds a certain tension to the movie. It's not pleasant to live, but it can make for a good movie. So it depends. But it's Hollywood. I like to have fun and I'm like, we're making a movie, we might as well enjoy it.
Right. Yeah, that's a great attitude to have about it all. Well, you brought up X-Men. Let's talk a little bit about your writing. So, obviously you've written X-Men, been involved you've written X-Men 2, and of course you've written Watchmen. Those are the big ones that we can all kind of latch on to. Can I just ask, how did you land the job of writing X-Men? That's a pretty big get, in my opinion. It's like the
Yeah,
get. It's like the get.
yeah, yeah. It's insane. It's a very long story, and I told it a bunch of times, but basically, the little movie I made in 1997, Burn, Bryan Singer had executive produced that, and so he knew me as a filmmaker, and then my film fell through. Like I had a deal for it, and it fell through, and then I was broke. I had nothing, and so I needed a job. So Brian was kind enough to hire me to answer the phones on X-Men. And and then he would just complain about the script and be like, "Oh, this script is terrible and it's going to ruin my career and nobody knows anything about the X-Men." And I was like, "Well, I know about the X-Men. I've been reading the comics since I was 10 years old and I know the characters." And so I suggested a scene to him. I was like, "Look, why don't you do a scene where Wolverine and Cyclops have this sort of thing back and forth, back and forth?" And he goes, "Good. Yeah, go write that for me." And I figured he was kidding. And then the next day he goes, "Where's my scene?" I was like, "Oh, I'm working on it." And then I wrote it, and then he put it in the movie. And then without telling the studio, he started to have me do rewrites on the script. And so by the time they found out, uh, Fox was forced to make a deal with me. So they paid me $35,000. That's the guild minimum rewrite fee. And I went up to Canada and I worked on the film and I did 150 drafts. We were just changing it every single day,
Yeah.
working with Brian, getting to see, I was in on the casting, the set building, like all that. So I just got to see the whole movie come together, this $80 million film. And and I got to be on set making up dialogue and scenes for Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart. And it was a dream. And the studio assured me I would never get credit. And then I ended up getting sole credit. And then Chris McQuarrie called me and said, "Do you realize that you're the most successful first time screenwriter in film history?" I was like, I didn't, but I'll take it.
I'll wear that hat.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
uh, so that's what happened, and it was insane. It was unheard of.
Christopher McQuarrie is also someone who's if our listeners don't know, he's done a lot of writing and a lot of and shepherding a lot of films to the finish line, and then of course he's directed films like Jack Reacher and the current Mission Impossible film. So and he's a great person to go find and just to hear about filmmaking in general. And if you don't know them, go check him out.
Yeah, he's one of the most brilliant living screenwriters right now, and he's been friends with him for a long time, and it's like being friends with Hemingway. He's just so smart and brilliant and expansive, and he's just a great guy. Anytime you can see Chris talk about movies is worthwhile.
That's awesome. One thing you said to me is stuck out really, that was really interesting. I feel like, at least we've been told this. I don't know. I've never been on a TV show. I've never been on a big production of a film, but I feel like in TV, the writers have more power. And then in film, the directors and the studio executives, those guys have more power. It seems super interesting dynamic that you were on set. I guess part of it is you were doing rewrites in the moment, but was there a good I mean, you felt like you write a scene, it would come to life. Like that seems kind of unique and different than the typical situation.
Totally. And well, most movie studios do not want the writer on set
Right.
because the more the writer changes, the more expensive it is.
Yeah.
So I was only there because Brian insisted that I be there and that we were going to keep rewriting things up until the moment we were shooting. And so yeah, no, the writer does not have a lot of power in feature filmmaking unless they're partners with the director, and that's their that's the way they work. And then yeah, working on TV show um, is different. It's like yes, the writer is the boss. The executive producer of it, and then you hire a director. But what I didn't realize about TV is you, the showrunner, don't really talk to the actor. I mean, you do, but you don't really give direction to the actors. Like legally, you can't. It has to come through the director. So it's a weird situation. Like you work on this thing for years, you get it up on its feet, then a director comes in for the week, and you can't talk to the cast about what you want. So that was an unusual thing. But yes, technically the writer is in charge on a big TV show.
It's super odd. I assume it's not always the case, but like you said, there's a lot of guest directors coming in week to week. If it was me, I would want to come in the week before so I could shadow the previous director, so I could have an idea like does that happen a lot where you could just kind of
Oh yeah,
see the,
yeah.
the
So,
flow of the set? Okay, yeah.
totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah. They come in, well, they come in for prep. And so they'll see how the thing's coming along, block out their scenes, and talk to the other directors and sometimes go to the set and see what's being done. But really, for the most part, it's our job as the executive producers to make it clear where they are in the story, what we need to accomplish, with the bits of the thing that are really important. There's a briefing meeting between the producers and the director just before they start shooting, and you go through every beat where you explain, here's what we need to here's what we need to say here, here's what we need to set up for this episode down the road. Here's something that they're referring to that happened 2 episodes ago and explain what that is, all of that sort of thing. It's an interesting process. But I really just did it for the first time on Warrior Nun, which was amazing. It was a great education, but it was a new. It was different. I thought it'd be like just like being on a movie, but it was different. It was cool.
Where what's their not say or power, but I assume does the director's input kind of end at principal photography, like after that week or however long it takes, 2 week or 2 weeks? Do they have a lot of say in the editing room too, or is it at that point it's the showrunners
Yes.
or okay,
No, they have. It's in their contract. It's in the DGA contract
okay.
that they get final or they get first cut. They get to put together their first assembly, but then after that it starts to become part of the machine. The polished cuts go to the showrunner and the studio executives, the network executives, that's that sort of thing, and eventually the director falls away. But they are in charge of their episodes, a good way into post.
Wow. I didn't expect that. It's pretty interesting to hear actually. Um, as far as for me, me and my partner, we meet every week. We're writing, and we're trying to
That's
just
great.
just to get things on the page, right? And hopefully take those next steps as we go. Getting a manager, an agent, hopefully throwing it on someone's desk eventually, right? And so, question is for us, to me, the dialogue is the hardest part to write, first of all. So how did you break past that barrier for you? Like how did you like, okay,
For
this sounds like
dialogue,
a dialogue. This sounds like a human being. Like how did you break past that for yourself? Or maybe that's not a hard part for you.
well, it was a process. No, it was. I mean, well, all of it's hard to begin with because you're working in a vacuum. It doesn't like hard thing about dialogue is the dialogue that reads well on the page doesn't necessarily speak well, and vice versa. Like
Yeah.
you can have dialogue that looks like it's just thrown away a couple of words here and there, and then you watch it, or it's like mammoth, or it looks like a mess on the page, and then they say it, and it's like, oh, so you're talking about what? You're talking about the leads are bad. You know, dialogue is a very tricky thing to pull off. And so part of what happened on X-Men, so I had written things and I had produced a movie. So I had taken dialogue from, and then, you know, and I'd also been an actor. So I'd taken dialogue from the page and put it up on screen before. But to actually write it, and then what would happen is I'd write something and I'd be like, oh, this is great. And, you know, like, and sometimes it was great. Like, you know, some things I was like, oh, I don't know where that came from, but I love it. And then sometimes I'd write something that I'd love, and then Bryan Singer would cross it out and leave a note saying, stop writing TV crap. Right. And so I had to figure out what that meant.
Sure.
And, or they'd say it's on the nose. And I was like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah,
Um,
getting those notes back are all like make it happier, make it sadder, and you're like, oh my God.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and so, but so Brian really taught me what A level dialogue is, and what, you know, because I could write A level dialogue, but then I'd also write C level dialogue, and he's like, this takes you out of the thing, and this ruins your whole scene, and so it really just is a matter of learning what works, watching, you know, being obsessed with great movies that you love, like Die
sure,
Hard or whatever. The dialogue
right.
is spot on all the way through. It's amazing.
It's pretty great.
You watch perfect movies with incredible dialogue, you'll learn different styles, you know, different tones and things like that. You know, you could break it out, you know, like Woody Allen, you could break it up. What people, you know, they talk like, but then they stood in the middle of the sentence, they stop, you know, like this sort of, you can write like that, or you can write like Cormac McCarthy, you can, or the Coen brothers. Um, and then, but the real key for me is something I learned in voiceover, which is if you're going to do like an audition or a part, you have to read it out loud first. And
Sure.
because you're like, oh, I got it in my head, I know it'll sound great. Then you do it, and it's like, oh, I didn't practice that. That sounds terrible. So dialogue, if you're having an acting background, is really helpful for dialogue as well because you just act it out, and you can see what feels comfortable in your mouth and what feels like, oh, that's too flowery, or it's too complex, or it's not complex enough, or what have you. You know,
Yeah,
it's a process. I mean, you just have to, you know, you have to do what you're doing, which is keep writing, keep making movies, keep trying it out. And sometimes you'll be like, God, I wish I hadn't said that way.
sure.
Or, oh my God, I don't know what I was thinking, but when I wrote that line, it really just took off. It was amazing.
Yeah, I think part of it is, I tell everyone who wants to break into the film industry, I say this as someone who hasn't broken in, but I say that, you
Oh, that's
need to
not true.
learn. Well, not to the extent that I want to, right? So
Right.
I think it's important to learn all the different aspects of filmmaking, like cinematography and editing and directing and getting in front of the camera, like you're talking about. Because one thing I find myself doing is like, I'm in the middle of a shoot on a day, and we're trying to get 4 or 5 pages on the day, or 6 pages or plus, depending on whatever it is. And
Right.
you're editing the movie in your head as you're going, right? And there's times where like something's not working in a scene, and some directors will sit there and just like no, say the dialogue, and it's like it's the dialogue's not working. You have to have the courage sometimes to be like, all right, this isn't working. Sometimes these people just get hung up, and like you're saying, they get you're like we're like in dungeons. It feels like sometimes we're just writing forever, and then you're just like you peek behind the curtain, like sunlight hits you, you're like, oh my God, like you forget what the world is sometimes. And
Totally.
so you're right. I think, yeah, getting those voices in, table reads are of course are super important. And yeah, it's awesome to hear. I kind of want to
Yeah.
talk to you
And
about,
also when
yeah,
people, sorry, but when the actors say, can I say it like this? It's like, yeah, go, you know, do it. Unless it's a key piece of information. If, if it sounds more natural to them, that way, that fits the way they talk. It fits the way their personality works. So, you know, anytime somebody says, you know, is it okay if I say it this way? Unless it changes the story, I'm like, yeah, go do it. You know,
yeah.
the more natural you can make it, the better.
Now
Sorry,
it's
what were you going to say?
no, you're totally fine. Again, this is, I just want to have a conversation. I'm not super hung up on us hitting every point or whatever. You directed Wolves in 2014 with Jason Momoa and Lucas Till. Um, what was that experience like for you? I know it's a loaded question, but I kind of tell everyone that making a movie is like going to war. if I'm the AD or if I'm the director on the day, I sit everyone down, the cast and crew that are, I was like, look, guys, we're gonna go to war. Like it's gonna be a very painful process. I was like, but if we work together and everything else, and maybe we can make something that people enjoy, maybe we'll have a good time doing it. And I sometimes, like I said, mentioned earlier, the 14-hour, 16-hour days. Sometimes you're waking up at 3 in the morning. Sometimes you're going to bed at 2 in the morning or later. Or you're getting off set at 2 o'clock, and then doing pre-production for the next day's shoot at 3 in the morning. So my question to you is, like, why do we do this? Like, why do we put ourselves through this process, and how can we kind of navigate that?
Oh, we do it because we love it. We do it
Right.
because one day when we were little kids, we were sitting in a movie theater and Indiana Jones climbed up on the side of a submarine and a blast of electricity ran up your spine and you went, that,
That.
whatever they're doing,
Yeah.
that, I want to do that. There's nothing. Brian Singer used to say, rock stars want my job. Like, you are in charge of, and not even just the director, but everybody who's working, but to work in this fantasy world where you can build anything and you can essentially show anything, go into ancient Rome or the Old West or space or what have you. I don't. It doesn't make any sense to me that anybody would not want to be in this business. I think it's the coolest thing, and it's the closest thing in the world to magic that we have, and everybody loves it. So the upsides are amazing. The difficulties of it are astounding.
Right.
And but again, when you set out to make a movie, I mean, that's nigh on an impossible task. And then once it's done, you're like, oh my God, like it's such a blur. I think we shot 90 days on the first X-Men and it's such a blur. Like at the time, it felt like forever and it was just endless and it was torturous and horrible. And then it was over and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe it's over. I don't want to leave.
100%.
So, that's the nature of it. And then when you sit in a movie theater with a crowd and you do something on camera or your actors do something or you see them react to a moment that you like. So the first time I saw X-Men with a regular audience was in Toronto the weekend it opened. And we're watching the movie and I'm with my friend and it's just dead silent first 15 minutes. And I was like, is everybody just bored out of their minds? And he's like,
Mhm.
no, they're not bored like this. I was like, I don't know. I think I might want to sneak out of here. And then there's the moment where Wolverine is he's driving his truck and he's talking to Rogue and he's like, look, I don't need automotive advice from you. Bam, they hit this log and he goes and he smashes out through the window and he flies like 50 feet and he hits the road and then, overhead shot and he just slides to a stop in the snow. And the audience went bananas. Like they just exploded like that. And so I'd known that moment was coming for 2 years at that point. And
Right.
I remember when we made it up. And then there we were a couple years later, and suddenly it's on the big screen. It looks amazing. Movie star does it, and the crowd goes insane. There's nothing like that. I mean, the only other thing is maybe being a rock star and being on stage in an arena. I mean, it's so so that's what we chase. But it's not just that. It's not just the rewards of, I mean, you can make money and you can win awards, you can the audience can love you, but it's also the day to day figuring it out. Like as you know, you get on set and there are things that are just impossible. Like we can't do this. We just
Right.
can't do it. And it's like, but we have to do it. So you find out a way. And what I learned on X-Men is there's always a way. There's always a way you can solve it. And you just have to be smart. And so that puzzle solving, those using that part of your brain in impossible situations with high stakes. It's great. I love it. I mean, I even love the ugly parts. I love, you know, even getting yelled at by directors or actors or whatever, I look back and I'm like, oh, that was great, you know.
Right. Yeah. No, you're 100% right in saying that. That's what I think it's why I keep coming back to it every day is that it's problem at the end of the day, it's all problem solving. When you sit there and you have a group of people and you're like, how do we, you had this wide shot in your head, but the room is just not big enough. Like, okay, what do we do to convey the same thing, but we have only this amount of time? I love directing, I love writing and cinematography, but I love being an AD just because it's just you're just managing so many different schedules and people, and it's just like it's like a dance, it's like a ballet, and I think
Well,
that is so
I
much
admire
fun.
great ADs, but I would never want to do that job. I'm always
Really,
like, that's like all of the hassle and very little of the fun.
yeah.
But
At
I do.
least on
But
at least on
you
short
need a great.
films, I'm sure it's not as taxing as the bigger stuff. But I don't know. I think I've always loved that. But yeah, I think for me, it's when you're working on this stuff, there's always like that one moment, at least on these short films, and you're like, oh, it's just that's why we do it, and then it's kind of grueling and painful. But then when as soon as it ends, you're like, oh my God, like what? Like it's over now, and then you want to kind of go back to your friends and it's always fun seeing them again at the premiere or seeing them again in passing or at an audition or something else like that. So that's awesome. That's awesome to hear. And one thing for me is just, talking to Bruno and Kathy and now talking to you, it just feels like people have the same story. I think it's kind of like reassuring or, that, okay, some of us are on the right path, or at least we have the right mindset to kind of keep pushing through. And again, I can't thank you guys enough for sitting down and talking to me about this kind of stuff.
My
I want
pleasure.
to I want to get more into the directing part of it, but this is called the Guyver Geek channel.
Indeed. Let's not lose focus here.
Let's not lose focus. I could do a whole podcast just on X-Men alone. But uh, let's talk about Guyver. Let's talk about Guyver 2. So, for me again, this is a huge inspiration on the things I love to watch, love to be involved in. Can you tell me what got you into the production? Like, what was that first initial either read with Steve, or how'd you hear about the Guyver 2 production?
It was just an audition for, an indie non-union film. And I had this manager, had a string of awkward managers back in the day, and this was one of them. And he got me this audition. And so I drove down to Van Nuys. I mean, really, just literally 3 or 4 miles from where I am now. And I auditioned at the place where they were building the cave set. And then they called me back and they wanted to see me again. And I was like, this is the lead in the movie. Like, this is everything I ever wanted. So I was really determined to do a good job. And so the second time I went in, I met Steve. And Steve, Steve is a very sweet guy, but he is just stone faced. Like you get nothing out of him as an actor. And so you just have to, you know, do your best, bring the fire, and hope that it sinks in. And then they called me and said I got the job, and I was so thrilled.
That's awesome. Yeah,
And that was it. And
Kathy mentioned that he's just like stone faced and it's hard to reading. And then later it was
yeah,
like, oh, you've kind of navigated that and kind of picked up on some of his cues, I guess, as you guys went through production.
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, he had a hard job. He had to make
Sure.
a movie of that scale for $800,000, and he
Right.
was sculpting all the creatures. You know, I mean, that was just a massive thing. But Steve, Steve's a tough guy. He's a martial artist, and he is very sweet, very friendly. But when he's getting it done, he's getting it done, and you better be getting it done with him. So,
That's awesome.
he takes it seriously, and I don't think he could have made the movies he made without that.
Right. Well, sorry, had you have heard of the first Guyver film with Jack Armstrong and Mark Hamill before Guyver 2?
No, I hadn't, and then I got the movie, so I rented the first one, and then I was like, oh no, I don't. Is this? This isn't what I was thinking because the first movie is very different.
It's absolutely different. Yeah.
And many people love it. I don't mean to diss it, but I was like, oh, because the movie I was auditioning for was serious and, like really hardcore anime adaptation. So yeah, so the first movie threw me off a little bit, but I talked to Steve about it and he's like, no, 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 we're not doing that. This
Something a little
is
different this time. Yeah.
a very different tone.
Well, you kind of bring up the tone and it's this hard anime thing. Sean Barker, He's well, first of all, a superhero character that, especially this is like you probably shot this in '93, I assume it came out in '94.
Correct.
Um, he's an anti-hero. He's someone who doesn't want to wear the cape and cowl, right? And in turn, the cape and cowl is essentially poisoning him in a lot of ways. It's
Yeah, and
like
forcing him to kill people. And yeah,
yeah,
it's a
that's
weird,
it feels ahead of
unique
its
show.
time. It feels ahead of its time.
I agree. Well, I mean, but I think that that's because this was a true anime adaptation, and anime had been doing that sort of thing for through the 80s and the 70s. But we just didn't see much of it. I did because I grew up in Japan, went to high school in Japan,
Oh
and
wow, I didn't know that.
yeah, I was more familiar with anime than most people. But um, what's happened is, I mean, Steve took a combination of what was cool about anime and what was cool about Hong Kong fight films, kung fu films, and combined them and made it into a sci-fi action film. Well, that was, 20 years before The Matrix, and it was 20 years before, 25 years before Ghost in the Shell. It just took a while for Hollywood to catch up with how cool things were in Hong Kong action films or in anime or in manga. Um, so it was really, yeah, it was very much ahead of its time, in
Yeah,
a lot of ways.
I tell people all the time that there's just nothing like it, especially coming from 1994. It's rated R Power Rangers, and maybe that's not even doing it justice, but the Alpha Stunts, I believe what they're called, with Koichi Sakamoto leading the team. What they brought to the table, and then you and Steve and Kathy and all you guys, like it's a different level, and it's just like even I watch all kinds of stuff now, and I have for the last 30 years, and I still feel like people haven't captured that yet. And then it's even on top of that, I just feel like up until 6 months ago when I started the channel, I just finding another person who knows about Guyver, finding someone, because I grew up in a population of 10,000 people, first of all, in Batesville, Arkansas. And finding someone who's seen these movies or know anything about this was like, what universe have I stepped in? And you
Right.
guys just nailed it. And it was just, you can feel how hard you guys were working throughout the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, we were working hard.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was my big break. I had always wanted to play a superhero, and like I said, I wanted to be Tom Cruise, and so I took it extremely seriously, and everybody else did as well. It was great. It
How long was production again? Was it 3, 4 months, three
was this
months?
summer. It was like, yeah, three or 4 months, probably 3 months or so, and we spent a lot of time up in the Angeles Crest at the archaeological dig, which was awesome. It was like summer camp, but we were all getting paid and pretending to be, superheroes and whatnot.
What was you there the entire time during production? Or sometimes, or I guess a better question would be, did you guys shoot in sequence or did you guys shoot out of sequence to kind of manage people's time and schedules? Do you
No, we
remember?
shot out of sequence. Well, we shot the order depended on the locations.
Okay.
So, um, so we would do, I think, oh yeah, so we started in the Angeles Crest. We started in the mountains. And we were on location there for however long it took to get all of those scenes. Then we went down into Van Nuys, to the cave set, and we would shoot all the stuff in the caves, and then all the interstitial stuff. I think the opening scene in that warehouse, I think that was one of the last things we shot. And that was like in the City of Industry. It was this horrible warehouse that was literally like greasy flakes of black
Oh man.
gunk were just falling on you all the time, and the pores of your skin were just black with grease. And yeah, that was an ugly location. But yeah, so it depended on what location we needed to shoot out first.
Okay. Do you have a favorite moment in the film? Like what's your, I obviously there's a lot of standouts. The final fight's incredible, and there's big ones of you. I'm gonna go get the bear. And then there's of
Right.
course
You
jumping
go
off
get
the
help. I'll
cliff.
take care of the bear.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
that's
Yeah.
my
So what?
favorite quote.
Okay.
Well, the jump off the cliff is the one. I mean, and then I don't know if you'd heard this story. I told it at the 30th anniversary screening, but we had been shooting for 24 hours straight because we were behind. We needed to pick up the rest of the film, and it's non-union, so they just work you till you're dead. But after 24 hours, Steve said, okay, I want you to drive up in the truck, get out of the truck, run over to this cliff, call out for Corey, and then you realize she's down to the bottom of the cliff. So then you run back to the across the street, get up your courage, and then run as fast as you possibly can to the edge of the cliff. And so the camera, they were perched on the edge of the cliff, and it's a cliff. Like the cliff
Right.
I'm looking down is the cliff I'm running towards. It's a 400-foot drop into sheer death. And I'm like, I'm exhausted. I've been working straight through, and I'm like, Steve, I'm gonna go right off the cliff. And he's like, oh, come on. And so he calls up Chris, I believe that was his name, one of the big stunt doubles, big guy who he was one of the Predator stunt doubles.
Oh, okay.
He's like, I don't know, 6'6" or something, just a great big guy. He's like, Chris, go out on the edge of the cliff and catch David if he falls over. And I'm like, hey, I am gonna take him off of that cliff
Right. Yeah.
like a bug off a wall. And he's
Yeah.
like, okay, action. And so that moment, that slow motion moment where I'm getting my nerve up, and I'm like this, I'm terrified, like terrified. And so I run, and so you see it. It's all in slow motion, and I'm running as hard as I possibly can. And like I think you can see, like if you go through frame by frame, you can just see as I pass the camera, I'm stopping like this.
Right.
And like just
Yeah.
like that. And I had this much room to stop and then skid to the edge of the thing. And then Chris is there like this. And it was fucking terrifying. It was terrifying. But then I saw the finished sequence and it was amazing. And there was one day, so the nightmare sequence where I'm where
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
bound in the thing and the things are all coming at me and I'm like, like that. Well, that took like I was tied up like that for about 2 or 3 hours, and I was covered in methicillin, which is this. It's a food additive. It's the stuff that the aliens drool,
Hmm.
right? It's this clear, slimy goo. So I'm covered in that. That leaches out your body heat, and the the warehouse door is open. It's absolutely freezing, and I'm like, Steve, I can't hold my arms out anymore. Like I can't stand here like this. And Steve goes, David, pain is temporary. Film is forever. I was like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
That was the attitude, and
Yeah.
I kind of dug it.
No, I mean that's again setting the tone. I mean, he's there putting finishing, touches on suits, and then of course the director is being pulled a thousand different directions. So they typically have less sympathy sometimes than other people, but it is hard. Kind of, I've found it's hard kind of instilling that like we're gonna go for 14 hours if we have to, no matter what, because this is what we do, kind of thing.
Yeah,
But no, that's all incredible to hear. Again, the superhero jump itself, the landing, that's one of the cool. I mean, I get a group of this film, seeing that on TV or well, I never saw it on sci-fi. Actually, I just had the VHS. Seeing that was just kind of like, what world do I live in? Because we didn't
oh yeah,
get, you know, I would say closest thing is like Iron Man, where the armor's coming onto you in separate pieces. We didn't get that until 2008. Way later.
that's right. Well, he did it with CG, and it was so early in CG. I'd never seen anything like it. So okay, so let me tell you, this is how brilliant Steve Wang is, and I don't know if he wants me telling this or not, but I'm going to tell you. This is how that shot was done. So you see me running towards the cliff, and I run past the camera, and then we went up one level to a smaller cliff overlooking the cliff road. And a Japanese stunt double dressed like me, who looks so much like me, I thought it was me, runs and does the swan dive off,
Right. Okay.
right? So he does the swan dive off the cliff but just goes down to the road below onto a mat. Then at the bottom of the cliff, the camera's pointed up like this. So CG me, I've been shot against on cables. So they've taken me out and placed me in the sky. And then I come down, the CG plates land on me, and then another Guyver drops from above past the camera. Then that Guyver dodges over this way while another Guyver runs off. So the camera like pans down to the footprints and then pans over and he's already like running off. So it's like five different Guyvers, including me, to stitch that one thing together. And it's incredible. Like you watch the sequence, it's just you have no idea what Steve did to create that
Yeah,
thing. Oh,
it's
now you
truly
do because I told you step by step.
right. Well, it's truly
But it
movie
was
magic,
insane.
and especially
Yeah,
you mentioned earlier your guys' budget was $800,000, and from the stories, well, first of all, if our listeners don't have it, Budget Biomorphs by Don O'Brien, it is a great source for all things about the first Guyver film and Guyver 2 in terms of behind the scenes stuff, and David here provided a great forward for it, and it's great, and so. Just the like engineering in I can't even say the word the talent that you guys had or Steve had, getting the budget slashed from I think it was originally I think it's a third of the budget, 800,000 ended up being a third of the original what was given to him or promised to him, and then just like getting every penny out of that. And I again, it's I mean I've been restoring it the best I could, whatever in the last 6 months, and I've seen it frame by frame multiple times, and
I'm sure.
yeah, and it's just like I'm always blown away by it. Like I just watch it, I'm like how like just the shot composition, the way things connect. I mean, just everything about it. There's true filmmaking going on there, and I'm always blown away by what you guys accomplished.
Well, it wasn't really me. I was just trying to survive. I was just a dumbass actor trying to, you know, be charming and remember my lines and everything. But yeah, what Steve and his team did was amazing. And Koichi and all the stunt people, incredible.
You mentioned earlier you have three Guyver babies. Do they ever have they seen the films? Do they are they just kind of like, oh, whatever, dad, or how does
I
that
don't
work?
know. I can't remember who the third one is, but the other Guyver baby is Koichi's daughter, who's now like 29
Oh,
years
okay, I see what
old.
you're saying. Okay.
And so I don't know. I haven't met her, but I would imagine you'd want to see your dad do what he does because I mean Koichi is just miraculous as a fighter, as a stunt coordinator. So hopefully she sees it and appreciates it. I don't know. I don't even know if my daughter sat through it all.
I guess that's what I was asking. Your daughter. So has she ever watched it or talked to you about it? Or again, it's kind of like, oh, whatever, dad. This is some other thing you've done,
Yeah,
or
she kind of knows about it, but
yeah,
yeah, I don't know that she ever. I mean, she's seen clips and like
sure.
people come to our house and they ask me and my wife Marisa, they're like, "How did you meet?" And I'm like, "Well, here it is." And then I've got the day we met on film, and so she's Mary who discovers the ship and whatnot. Um, oh, and the way we met, so the first scene I shot was us pulling up to the camp, and I'm carrying the beer or maybe Kathy's carrying the beer. Me and Kathy come up and she hands the beer off to Mary and says, "Mary, go put this in the mess tent," and so on and so forth. So in between takes, Marisa says, she's now my wife, says to Steve, she's like, "Well, he's the lead of the movie, right?" And points to me. He goes, "Yeah," and she goes, "Okay, so when he walks away, I should probably check out his ass." And I was like, "That's good acting. Like this girl really knows what she's doing." So
Yeah.
that's how we met. So yeah, so I think my daughter's seen clips. I don't think she sat through the whole thing. She refused to watch Watchmen until her friends
Wow.
at college made her do it. And
Wow.
I'm like, that's my movie. I worked for 9 years on that movie.
Yeah, again, I've been doing a podcast for not this, but another one for about almost 5 years now. And it's called Podcast Two for One. And on there, we bring in on some professors from UCA and other people who've worked on some TV stuff, and we break down scripts, and it's some of the things we do. And it's super fun and just going from sequence to sequence, sometimes beat to beat, and just kind of look at the
That's
whole
great.
picture.
It's a great
Yeah, it's
education.
it is. It's a great way to kind of hopefully keep us a little in tune. And so I say all that to say like we could do 10 podcasts just on Watchmen, 10 podcasts on X-Men 1, X-Men 2, and so I'm trying to stay Guyver focused. I really am, I promise you.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So what was like being on set, I know you talked about long hard days that you're trying to survive. Kathy and Bruno, they seemed like they had a great time, and it was kind of like everyone's, getting their feet wet in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it was great. It was like I say, it was like summer camp. It was super fun, but I had to do some things that they didn't have to do.
Sure.
Like there's a scene where I'm standing on the top of the boulder and I'm looking contemplative, and it's like this. It's a shot. I'm up on like a 30-foot boulder, and Steve is off camera going, "Okay, walk to the edge of the boulder." Except there is no edge. It just sort of like peters down and then drops. So I'm walking, but I'm sort of like walking. I'm trying to look pensive, but I'm walking very carefully. And he's like, "You look afraid." And I'm like, "I am afraid." So there were a few things that I had to do that were a little dangerous, but I was 24 and full
You're a
of
superhero.
madness, and I was like, "Yeah, I can do anything." And so it was all right. It was a great time. It was hard and tiring, but it was really fun. It was really fun.
I think one of the again, being a Guyver fan sometimes is it's kind of hard because you don't get a lot of information. Again, you doing this podcast will be more than I feel like I've been able to find on the internet in a lot of ways. Just talk about Guyver specifically. There's been a lot of rumblings. It feels like, you're in these Reddit threads or whatever, and everyone has their own theories about Guyver 3 or whatever. Um, from what we understand as the fans, is that Steve has tried to get the rights from not New Line, but I think it's called Akawa. People who do the anime or people who do the manga, I mean, and it's just kind of this weird. We just don't really know fan wise, and so there's also been, I think, a snippet on the internet of you talking about potentially that you had a pitch or that you had written a draft for Guyver 3. Is
I
there?
did. Well, back in the day, before I wrote X-Men, I wrote out a pitch for Guyver 3. And Steve was like, "Nah, I don't want to do that." And then so I sort of let it go. Um, then I got a call from an executive I knew, a film executive at MGM, who said he was a huge Guyver fan, and he wanted to talk about doing another Guyver movie with MGM, like real budget. And so Steve and I went down. We had a meeting at MGM, and we talked to him. And everybody was very excited. But I think once he started to get into the rights, the Katakawa of it all, and Brian Yuzna, and it's I don't know why, but it's very complicated and difficult to work out. What you need is a studio like that to just pay everybody off and say, "Look, what do we need to do to make this happen?" And I think the appetite wasn't big enough at MGM to take those steps. So I don't know. I mean, I talked to Brian Yuzna, the producer, about doing a Guyver where some new kid gets a Guyver unit and then doesn't know what to do with it, and then I show up as the experienced Guyver, but like I'm sort of at the end of my run, and the Guyver unit's kind of killing me, and it was cool, and we got very excited about what we could do with it. And Steve's certainly down. It's just a rights issue. It's such a bummer, you know.
Yeah,
Some things
no, that's
it's
super
difficult
fascinating to
to.
hear. Yeah, it's passing the torch, kind of like also an old man Logan situation where
Yeah, I'd be old man Guyver. Yeah,
old man Guyver. That's awesome. Yeah, no, I just again, even just hearing that, I'm just like my mind's being blown because again,
I know. Well, who wouldn't
yeah,
want to see it? It's freaking awesome. But
yeah.
but yeah, it's tough to. But maybe we'll put this out, and that'll spark some other executive to go, "Oh,
Yeah.
we're going to
I
work that
told
out."
I told Kathy that she needed to suit up next time. I told her, hey, 'cause
Totally,
her character is super unique also in the fact that she's, we and her got into this on our pod that she is a female character in 1993, 94, and she's got a lot of agency and she's the smartest person in the room. And I feel like that
totally.
was kind of unusual, especially for that kind of genre at the time. And I told her, I said, it'd be cool to even see her suit up in next installment.
Well, and I don't know how much of a spoiler this is, but she fires the final shot that
She
takes
does.
out Crane and sends him, saves my life and sends him on his way towards destruction. And it's really, I talked to Nathan Long, the screenwriter, about it. I was like,
Right.
that's so cool because that's how I've always written my female characters. I mean, why have them if they don't have agency, if they're not badass? I mean, not
Right.
everybody has to be a badass, but you have to treat your female characters with respect, and a lot of people didn't do that, but Nathan did it back in the
Yeah,
day, and
he did.
Corey was a pretty cool assertive character. So yeah, no, I'd love to see her Guyve up.
One thing that's really kind of stuck with me just in the last few months that I've like, man, I would love to see you guys, either you or Nathan, team up or whatever to do a graphic novel. If we can't get the film, maybe we can kind of finish that story out in a different format. And again, the rights, all those things, that's a huge mess. That is the issue with all this. But I even just, anything we get from anybody, we're just like we just
Yeah, it would
love,
be cool, but it graphic novels don't pay enough to
to get
for
you
me
to
to
get,
invest
gotcha.
my
Okay.
time, you know.
Gotcha,
Like
gotcha.
when I could write a movie for 20 times as much, it's a
Sure.
little difficult to, not that I'm
Absolutely.
not dedicated to the fans, but I would rather I hold out hope for the day that we actually get to make another Guyver movie.
I I will be the first one to buy a ticket, I promise.
All right,
Um,
well, I won't you do that.
Yeah, please do. So, David, what's in your pipeline right now? What do you have in the future? What are you working on? And you said Warrior Nun recently.
Well, Warrior Nun, I was an executive producer on Warrior Nun. I'm very proud of that show. It was amazing. So, of course, Netflix canceled it after 2 seasons. But those first 2 seasons are on Netflix. We shot it in Spain. I think it's just gorgeous.
Wow.
I'm very, very proud of that show. The action is amazing. The cast is amazing. Um, I have a few things. I have a movie that I sold to Amazon that hopefully is going this year. I have a TV show that I sold to Universal that is out to directors, and then I have another project that just came together with a big streamer, but I can't really talk about them
Sure.
at the moment. We'll have, I think, at some point, I don't know when for sure, but I think we'll have more Metal Gear re-releases coming. And of course, Metal Gear Delta will be coming down the road, which is very exciting. So yeah, I got a lot going on. It's just all top secret till
Until
it
it's
gets
not.
made. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I'll be the first one to buy a Metal Gear Delta as well. So I think I played Metal Gear
So,
3 again last year, I think. All
oh,
through it
nice.
again. It's just, yeah, all those are masterpieces. So, yeah, so
Oh, I
that's, I
guess
mean,
I'm allowed to say I played the opening of Delta 2 days
ooh,
ago,
wow.
and it's gorgeous.
It looks,
So
yeah, it
that's an
looks what we've
exclusive.
seen. It looks incredible. Yeah, it looks
It's incredible. Just the
Unreal Engine
moment,
5.
the moment where he smokes the cigar and
Yeah.
flicks it into camera, you can see the leaf wrapping on the cigar and the cigar label, and I mean, yeah, it was spectacular.
Can
So
I ask, did you guys have to re-record any lines, or are they remastering older lines, or
no, as far as I know, I mean, unless there's a problem along the way, I think they're just using the original voice tracks, which
gotcha?
is fine. You
Oh, they're
probably
great.
shouldn't
Yeah.
mess with that performance and
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm
make
I'm
it into
super
something
ex
it wasn't.
I'm super excited for that, and I know all our fans are too. And just last thing I want to ask you, Dave, before we hop off here, do you have any advice for, again, it's Guyver Geek channel, but I tell everyone I'm a filmmaker first, and then a Guyver Geek second. Do you have any advice for anybody who's wanting to break into the film industry or just the entertainment industry in general? Just any basic level advice you can give them?
Well, touching on what we were talking about earlier, be open to all sorts of different opportunities in the business. I mean, if you have to be a writer, if you have to be a director or an actor or whatever, do that as well. But to do that is takes massive perseverance and unflagging fire and passion and the desire to continue to learn all the time. Um, it's a full life commitment to just break in. And then once you've broken in, to continue to work for the next 30 years is its own skill. So it really has to be something that you absolutely love, that you that that because your enthusiasm is what will get you where you want to go. So when I'm pitching a thing, when I'm pitching a film or a TV show, it's not necessarily the story that sells it. That's part of it, but it's the glint in my eye. It's when I'm like, then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then boom, and I pitch it all out. And if I can make you feel 5 great trailer moments in a movie pitch, you, I'll probably sell that pitch, because that's all. So translating your love of what brings you to it to other people is what creates the electricity that gets you hired and creates a career. So I don't know if that's particularly original
No, I
or
think it's
not, but
great.
that's how it is. It's you survive on love and unflagging commitment in the face of horrible, dismissive, stupid people.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
Sometimes.
that's awesome to hear. And again, David, I can't thank you enough for taking your time out of your busy schedule to sit down and talk to me and then also relay information back to the fans. How can our listeners, how can our fans, what social media plugins would you like to throw in there? I know you're on I know you're on X, sorry. I know it's
I'm on the
Twitter or
Twitter.
X.
No, I'll never
Yeah.
call it X.
I know, me
I'm on
too,
the
me too.
Twitters at David B. Hayter, and I am on the Instagrams as the dash David dash Hayter.
Perfect.
So come see me there and give me a good old Guyver shout out.
That's awesome.
And thank
Um,
you to you and the fans for your continued support of our weird little movie. And, we all appreciate it so much.
Again, thank you very much, David. Guyver Geeks, thank you so much for watching. And go follow Mr. Hayter on all the social media platforms. I'll make sure I drop those in the links below, the description below. If you haven't subscribed already, youtube.com/@the Guyver Geek. We have tons of cool restoration things like the Guyver trailer and Guyver clips and those kind of things. And now, of course, speaking to various members and cast members, cast and crew of the films, and hopefully we'll get some others down the line. And David, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it, and it means the world to me.
Well, thank you, Donavon. Great questions and really fun conversations. So happy to do it anytime. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
For more content like this, head over to youtube.com/@theguyvergeek for 4K remasters, retrospectives, behind the scenes, and more as we catalog the Guyver universe. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.